Bom dia. É muito prazer. I cannot speak in Portuguese. I'd like to speak in English. Professor Gilmar Majero, thank you for organizing this seminar and inviting me. I'm Seung-won Jung from Banco KDB do Brazil, the subsidiary in Brazil of Korea Development Bank KDB. It is my honor and pleasure to participate in this seminar. Professor Gilmar Majero and I prepared this paper, and I will talk about Korean economic development and the role of industrial policy. My presentation is composed of two parts. One is overview of Korean economic development, and the other is the role of industrial policy. I'd like to start with Korean economic development performance. In the 1970s, 80s, Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world. But Korea has accomplished successful economic development since the 1960s. So its GNI per capita reached about $21,000 last year. And it is about a half of the average of those of G7 countries. In the graph, blue line is Korea and green line is Brazil. Also, as in this table showing industrial structure, Korea has developed as an industrial country whose manufacturing sector is very important. Moreover, its major manufacturing industries like automobile, information technology, steel, shipbuilding, etc. Have grown to top tier in the world. On the other hand, there are some characteristics of the Korean development. Outward-looking strategy or export-led industrialization may be one of them. The strategy began in the 1960s and has characterized the Korean economy thereafter. Korean economy had a high dependence on overseas markets. Its export GNI ratio has risen continuously to about 60% last year, as in this graph. Korean export GDP ratio in 2010 was very high when compared with those of Brazil and the G7 countries, as in this graph. It may be caused by the outward-looking strategy. The second characteristic is state-led development. Until the 1970s, Korean economic development can be characterized as state-led development. The government made a series of economic development plans and influenced resource allocation through financial support, tax cut, etc., and sometimes restricted market entry in order to promote an industry. The third one is a bigger weight of large conglomerates, so-called chaebols. Chaebols contributed to the Korean development through R&D, pioneering overseas markets, and the leading role in the development of capital and technology-intensive industry, etc. However, concentration of economic power to the chaebols got serious, and small and medium enterprises are still weak. These are hard issues in Korea. I think one of the most interesting and meaningful characteristics of Korean development may be economic growth with a relatively equal income distribution. Someone says the trade-off relation between growth and distribution, or growth first, distribution later. However, as in this graph, when we review cross-country data of Gini coefficient, which measures inequality of distribution, Korea is below average of those of 25 major countries. So Korea's income distribution may be said to be relatively good. However, recent data in this graph show a decreasing tendency of inequality in Brazil and a small increase of inequality in Korea. Now, I'd like to talk about the meaning of Korean economic development experience using cross-country data on economic growth after World War II. In the graph, the horizontal axis represents GDP per capita in 1950, and the horizontal vertical axis represents its growth rate from the year to 2006. If poor countries grow faster than rich countries, the graph might show downward sloping. However, the graph shows the opposite. It implies that high-income countries grow faster than low-income countries. So it may be said that Korean economic development was one of the exceptionally successful cases. In addition, its initial conditions at the dawn of the development were poor. Korea lacked natural resources. For example, it had to import 100% of crude oil. Its population density was high. Korean population density is more than 20 times that of Brazil. On the other hand, its territory is composed of mainly mountains, and its cultivated field is about 1/3 of the country. So a large portion of food like wheat, corn, etc. had to be imported. In addition, almost all of the industrial facilities were destroyed during Korean War, which lasted from 1950 to 1953. That's why Korean development experience may be worth referring. Korea was a representative country that which implemented industrial policy in its development process and developed successfully. Now I'd like to speak about the role of industrial policy. To begin with, I'd like to give a brief introduction. In general, industrial policy means government intervention, and its main purpose may be to correct market failure. Industrial policy can be defined as a policy which affects the economic welfare of a country by intervening in the allocation of resources between industries or in the industrial organization of certain industries. Also, it can be summed up in the following 4 points. First, policies affecting the industrial structure, like nurturing infant industries, etc. Second, policies to correct the market failure associated with technological development and imperfect information. Third, the policies seeking to raise economic welfare through administrative intervention in the industrial organization of individual industries. Finally, policies based on political demands rather than economic consideration. For example, voluntary restriction of export in order to deal with trade friction. On the other hand, there are two different views on the role or effect of industrial policy. One view emphasizes market mechanism and thinks that government intervention brings about economic failure. The other view is that a positive role of a government is possible, as the experience of Korea, Japan, etc. suggest. Also, it may be thought that developing countries need to implement industrial policies because latecomers have difficulty in catching up with developed countries without industrial policy. There are various empirical studies implying positive or negative effect of industrial policy. I would like to introduce the types of Korean industrial policies briefly, before talking about them in each development stage. When I reviewed Korean industrial policies in 1994, I was able to classify them into 5 categories, which were: first, the policy for the improvement of industrial structure, like a promotion of infant industries and high-tech industries and the rationalization of declining industries. Second, the policies for small and medium enterprises. Third, support for technology development. Fourth, policy for facility investment. And finally, policy for export. Regarding policy tools, financial support and tax benefits were main tools. Korean industrial policy was changed in line with Korean development stage, strategy, etc. Korea has undertaken economic development in earnest since the early 1960s. At that time, the government made a conscious shift from the inward-looking growth strategy to the outward-looking growth strategy. The essence of the strategy was to promote exports of light manufactured goods. In the process of the export-led industrialization, there were various measures like financial support, tax cut, Korean currency devaluation, and so forth. Financial supports for export were expanded in the decade, and export credit were important. Export loan was introduced in 1961 and became the most important policy tool for export in Korean development stage. As in this graph, its share in total Korean won loans of deposit money banks rose from 2% in 1961 to 15% in 1974. And it continued high until the early 1980s. Since then, it showed downward trend and fell to 1% in 2010. Foreign exchange rate system was changed to unitary floating one in 1964, and Korean won was continuously devaluated, as in this graph, to acquire price competitiveness of export goods and to improve the international balance of payments. Regarding tax support, export firms enjoyed benefits in tariff, income tax, value-added tax, etc. However, they have been abolished from the mid-1990s, mainly because of WTO agreement. In the 1970s, Korean economic development strategy was basically changed, and heavy and chemical industry promotion, so-called HCI drive, was propelled, especially after the announcement of HCI development plan in 1973. Major methods to promote HCI drive were special laws, financial support, and tax incentives. Special laws to promote each HCI industry, like machinery, shipbuilding, electronics, steel, petrochemical, and non-ferrous metal industries, were enacted from 1967 to 1971, as in this table. Financial support to promote HCI was given through KDB's facility loans, National Investment Fund, and Korea Export-Import Bank. KDB supplied about 80% of its loan to manufacturing to HCI in the decade, and the share rose in this graph. I think it was very important because KDB's share in Korean financial market was big. Its share in all Korean banks' total loan and facility loans were around 20% and 50% respectively in the decade. National Investment Fund Act was enacted in 1973, and the fund was provided mainly to HCI's investment, as in this table. Kakshin Bank was established in 1976 and supplied money for deferred payment, export of ship, and so on, for the purpose of supporting HCI. Also, financial assistances for the import substitution of machinery and plants and the import of original technology were practiced. On the other hand, tax incentives were given to investment in HCI. Also, there were a protective tariff and regulation on imports of heavy and chemical industry products for the purpose of acquiring domestic market. In the 1970s, during which HCI drive was propelled, Korean economy grew rapidly, and Korean industrial structure was upgraded, as in this table. In spite of this performance, the HCI drive also accompanied some negative results, including overinvestment and insolvent firms. So there have been different views on the HCI drive. However, I think it could be said that development of the Korean industry and representative firms like Samsung Electronics and the Hyundai Motor Company was possible due to the HCI drive. In the 1980s, basic changes in Korean economic development strategy and industrial policy took place again, and some industries were rationalized. In the decade, economic system was liberalized and the market was opened. Until the 1970s, Korean economic development can be characterized as government-led one. But in the early 1980s, many problems like lowering efficiency and insolvent firms emerged. In 1980, the government presented two basic directions. One is to build a foundation for an advanced economy, and the other was to enhance national welfare. Also, for the former, three basic directions were set forth, which were stabilization, liberalization, and the market opening. The government got out of regulation and direct intervention and started to renew its role as indirect support, and wanted investment, production, prices, and industrial development to be determined by market mechanism rather than government plan, intervention, or support. For this purpose, the government established various institutions, institutional tools. Also, liberalization of import and FDI was advanced as on this page. So Korea's economic openness was enhanced. The ratio of import liberalization rose from 69% to 96% in the decade. In the case of FDI, government substantially relaxed restriction on FDI in recognition of its effect of promoting competition and transferring advanced foreign technologies. So the ratio of FDI liberalization increased as in this table. With liberalization and market opening, restructuring of HCI took place in the decade. In 1980, the government restructured industries suffered from excess capacity, and firms producing automobile, power generating equipment, etc., were forced to merge with others or to specialize according to product lines. In the mid-1980s, further rationalization of industries took place in shipping and overseas construction. On the other hand, there was an important change in Korean industrial policy in the 1980s. That is, the industry development law was enacted in 1986, and the industrial supporting system was transformed. Its enactment changed the basis of industrial policy from industry-specific policy to activity-specific policy, and set up principles and directions of government intervention in restructuring industries. Korean overseas direct investment, that is outward FDI, was not high when compared with other countries, but its growth rate were high in the mid 1990s and recently, as in this graph. The graph shows the ratio of outward FDI flow to gross fixed capital formation. Dark blue line is Korea. The ratio of Korea was lower than the average of developing countries, much less developed countries. In the 1990s, there was a notable thing related to globalization. It is President Kim's globalization drive, so-called 세계화 drive. And various efforts were made by the administration, a committee for 세계화, etc. The committee reviewed many tasks for globalization, and 53 tasks were pursued. The globalization drive proceeded until 1997, and it may be evaluated to have had a positive influence on Korean outward FDI in the decade. On the other hand, in the mid-1990s, the industrial supporting system was reformed because the WTO agreement regulating subsidies more strictly became effective in 1995. So subsidies for export, import substitution, etc. were abolished. In December 1997, the currency crisis of Korea occurred, and the Korean government signed a standby agreement with the IMF on December 3rd. The reforms of 4 sectors, that is financial, corporate, labor, and the public sectors, proceeded from May 1998. In corporate sector, it was propelled to reduce the overextended and overlapping business lines among Korean business conglomerates. In 1998, there was a so-called big deal by which big corporations of Hyundai, Samsung, etc. realigned some of their business lines, including semiconductor, petrochemical, etc. On the other hand, the government tried to nurture venture businesses and small and medium enterprises. Also, it pursued to upgrade industrial structure with a focus on knowledge. Now I'd like to talk about major industrial policies for recent 10 years. When the previous President Roh was inaugurated in February 2003, Korean economy recovered from the Korean crisis in most aspects. However, corporate investment was not vigorous, and youth unemployment rate was high, as in this table. The green line is youth unemployment rate, and it was 8% in 2003. The red line is increased rate of gross capital formation, and it was 4% in the year. In such a situation, Roh administration wanted to expand growth engine through facilitating corporate investment, etc. In addition, it sought to relieve difficulties in businesses of small and medium enterprises and support them in recognition of their importance in employment, etc. Also, the administration emphasized innovation as the most important source of Korean economic growth in the future. On the other hand, the administration prepared the policy for developing to economic center of Northeast Asia, especially as a major center of finance and distribution. In 2008, when the current re-administration began, international economic conditions were drastically worsened because of the after effect of subprime mortgage loan crisis in the United States. Maybe the administration had to put its policy priority on coping with the global crisis. Also, it adopted a green growth strategy, and the renewable energy industry related to power generation using solar, wind, and tidal energy has been developing. Now I'd like to speak about the role of KDB. To begin with, I will talk about Korean financial system briefly. As these two graphs illustrate, the Korean financial system can be said bank-based one because it reveals a high portion of indirect finance. The graph on the left shows the ratio of domestic credit to private sector over GDP, which represents the importance of indirect finance in a financial system. As you can see, the ratios regarding indirect finance of Korea and Japan are high. However, as in the graph on the right, the ratio regarding direct finance of Korea and Japan are lower than that of the United States. In Korean banking sector, there was a division of roles between KDB and other banks. Korea Development Bank supplied mainly facility loan, as in this graph, and its main clients were large companies in heavy and chemical industry. Also, it supplied funds for upgrading industrial structure and promoting the promising industries from the viewpoint of a long-term horizon. On the other hand, commercial banks supplied mainly working capital and supported the industries with a competitive advantage at that time, that is, light industry in the past through export loan, etc. KDB, as a representative development finance institution of Korea, played a vital role in the Korean economic development process. Its financial services were crucial in respect of both quantity and quality. The bank was the largest Korean bank until the 1990s, especially its share was high during Korea's development stage. Also, it played a leading role in promoting target sectors like heavy and chemical industry in the 1970s. When chronologically reviewed, KDB has fulfilled its role anticipating and coping with changes in the economic and the financial environment, as in this page. I'd like to skip a detailed explanation. Hitherto, I talked about Korean industrial policies. Considering Korean experience, it may be hard to deny the the possible contribution of industrial policy to economic development. However, it may be also hard to firmly say that Korean industrial policy in past is good for developing countries now. That's because the world economic environment has been changing continuously. Korea established the proper strategies coping with its different development stages and the changes in domestic and overseas economic environments. It implies the need of a continuous effort for establishing a proper strategies. As Korea did, that is export-led industrialization in the 1960s, HCI drive in the 1970s, liberalization in the 1980s, globalization in the 1990s, etc. In addition, I'd like to talk about some fundamentals for the success of industrial policy. Most of industrial policy and the market intervention mean that someone becomes the beneficiary of the related measures. So such things may induce a rent-seeking activity. That's why the mechanism to prevent such activity is needed. Furthermore, for the purpose of promoting future growth engine and upgrading industrial structure, well-designed institutions to select the future winners and surplus are required, and the capability and the cleanness of a public sector may be needed. On the basis of these fundamentals, subsidies may be given to the right candidate, and national resources can be allocated efficiently, and the waste of private sector resource used in the rent-seeking activity may be reduced. Regarding the role of public banks, including development banks, the experience of KDB tells the public banks are able to contribute to economic development, and the leading role of a development bank is important. On the other hand, I'd like to emphasize that nowadays it is necessary to consider the regulation of subsidies in the WTO system. Finally, I think Korean experience may be worth referring, even though there are different views on them. Hitherto, I briefly talked about Korean economic development and the role of industrial policies. I will resign Director of Bangkok KDB to Brazil today. From next week, I'm going to work at the research department of Korea Development Bank head office in Seoul. I expect Korean experience to be shared through various ways like this seminar. I hope successful development of Brazil and your interest in making cooperation with Korea and the Korea Development Bank. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Muito obrigado.